Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. The federal government's GST tax break ends Saturday with data showing disappointing results for Canadian businesses. Plus, Lethbridge police search for the driver of a car who hit a youth then drove away. And Eagles fans take to the streets in Philadelphia to see their Super Bowl champs.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. A court case on the legality of the prorogation of Parliament is underway this week, with a judge expediting the case to be heard February 13th and 14th in Ottawa. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is arguing that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's prorogation of Parliament was unconstitutional. Here to update us on how the case is proceeding is attorney John Carpay, president of the Justice Centre, who joins me from Ottawa. John, welcome. What is the latest on this case?
The Justice Centre's lawyers were putting forward our case on Thursday, February 13th, to argue that government needs to be accountable to Parliament under our Constitution. So Parliament is the boss, and prorogation is a valid tool for shutting down Parliament after a session has been concluded, but it should not be used as a political tool by the Prime Minister to serve the interests of his political party. And so we're saying prorogation's fine, of course, but it shouldn't be abused in this fashion. I think the judge is very keen on releasing a decision early. He ordered an expedited hearing, and I would not be surprised if we had a ruling by February 21st. Would not surprise me.
February 21st, so that's only a week away, and it's, 4 weeks before Parliament's scheduled to return. So what makes you feel that way, John? How can you be so sure?
The judge was not at all sympathetic to the federal government's arguments that this should be like a normal court case and it should go on for months and years. The judge said, no, if we don't release a decision soon, then the decision would be irrelevant. If we come up with a court ruling in May, June, July, August, then it doesn't serve much of a point. But because we might get a ruling as early as Friday, February 21st, that's going to have a real impact, because the court ruling will mean that prorogation never really happened, and so Parliament will be back in session.
Yes, possibly a month early. So once a decision is made, then, John, could the feds appeal it or anything?
Well, the federal government could appeal, and but typically the rule is that the judgment stands unless and until it's overturned. Even if we lose, it's going to provide some clarity on what the Prime Minister's powers are. Currently, there's no Canadian case law that specifically outlines what the Prime Minister can and cannot do in regard to proroguing Parliament. So it'll be worthwhile from that sense. We'll get some clarification in place, because this is the first court action of its kind in Canada.
Wow, so this could be setting a precedent. We'll be watching for that ruling next week. John, thanks so much for your time today. That was attorney John Carpay, president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedom, joining us from Ottawa. Conservatives are focused on the man they think will be that they'll be running against, which is Mark Carney. MPs headed into the Conservative caucus meeting and stayed on message about the man they've branded as, quote, carbon tax Carney. Carney is the apparent front runner in the Liberal leadership race and has pledged to end the consumer carbon price. Conservative MPs brushed off concerns today about their party's recent slump in the polls since Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced his plan to resign. Meantime, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says he expects a snap election call if Carney wins the Liberal leadership next month. Singh says the New Democrats will be ready to fight an election campaign when it begins. Part of that fight includes the NDP's pledge to remove the GST from essentials like home heating, cell phone services, grab-and-go grocery items, diapers, and children's clothes. And speaking of GST, the federal government's goods and services tax break on a slew of items ends tomorrow. Shoppers have been getting some relief on restaurant meals, children's clothing and toys, some alcohol, and more for the past 2 months now. Canadian business owners say the GST holiday was a gift, but not one that inspired the flurry of sales that some anticipated. Data from payments processor Moneris shows the number of transactions across all stores during the tax relief period fell 4% compared with a year ago. And one local business in Lethbridge says the GST tax break didn't affect his sales in the way it was meant to. The owner of King of Trade Pawn Shop also mentioned it was confusing to staff and customers on what items were meant to be taxed.
You know, we really didn't see an increase in sales. It happened before Christmas is when that got put in. And we did have people asking about it. And, you know, we reduced our video games in accordance with those that new tax. But really the sales were the same. It didn't really increase sales for us. The hardest thing about it was that it took a lot of time in our computer system to make adjustments. And there was a lot of questions by customers as to what was taxable and not taxable, and I think there wasn't a very good job done on an explanation for it from the government. I think the government was trying to do a good thing. It just, in my opinion, didn't really work out for the retailers or the customers, and so maybe next time they could think it through a little better.
And in other news, the Canadian Union of Public Employees says more than 400 school support workers with the Parkland School Division were served a 72-hour strike notice today. Local President Wendy Harmon says the union expects to begin work to rule actions on a Tuesday, meaning they'll be asked not to work beyond the hours they're paid for and not to do any volunteering at their jobs. Some 4,000 other educational workers are on strike in Edmonton, nearby Sturgeon County, and Fort McMurray. Another 2,000 with school divisions in Calgary and elsewhere in Alberta have taken strike votes. A Red Deer police officer, RCMP officer rather, who was investigated in a shooting death during the attempted apprehension of a suspect, has been found not guilty of breaking the criminal code, according to an investigation that was concluded February 13th. BCN's Naveen Day is here to explain this investigation in more detail. Naveen?
Well, Jeanette, according to this recent decision, on April the 13th of last year, the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team, or ASIRT, was ordered to investigate whether the force used by the officer during this incident was reasonable. The case involved a man calling 911 to report his son had a knife and had threatened to slit the father's throat, and that earlier the same day, the man had obtained a court order to have his son apprehended under the Mental Health Act. When officers arrived, the suspect still had the knife and then was tased because he would not let it go. According to the report, the taser seemed to have no effect, so a second officer tased the suspect as well. The tased individual then dropped to his knees, but according to other witness officers, the suspect lunged at one of the officers, who then shot him 4 or 5 times, resulting in his death. The father of the suspect says the gunshots were unnecessary since his son was already on his knees and tased. However, ASIRT has concluded that under Section 25 of the Criminal Code, a police officer is justified in using as much force as is reasonably necessary, and that force intended to cause death or bodily harm is justified if the officer believes it was necessary to prevent the death or bodily harm of the officer or any other person. ASIRT says while the death of this individual is unfortunate, the force used by the officer was proportionate, necessary, and reasonable in the circumstances. Jeanette?
Okay, thanks so much, Naveen. In other news, Lethbridge police are asking for public assistance in the investigation of a hit-and-run pedestrian collision. On February 10th at about 5:04 p.m., a male youth was crossing Jerry Potts Boulevard West around Mike Mountain Horse School when he was struck by a vehicle. The vehicle made no attempt to stop, and the youth sustained minor injuries. CCTV images reveal the car was a silver sedan, but are not clear enough to identify the vehicle or driver. Lethbridge police are asking anyone who may have been in the area on Monday, February 10th between 4:55 and 5:15 p.m. And may have witnessed the incident or has home security video or dash cam footage to call 403-328-4444 and reference that number on your screen. When comparing recent crime trends in Canada and the U.S., Lethbridge has the highest rate of property crime nationwide. That is according to a report released Thursday by the Fraser Institute, which found that Lethbridge's rate was more than twice the national average. The same day, Lethbridge Police Chief Shaheen Medizadeh told reporters the Fraser report is flawed because it draws from out-of-date information from 2019 to 2022.
In 2023, Lethbridge ranked 6th in CSI for violent crime, and we expect a 10% decrease for 2024 from those numbers. And in 2023, Lethbridge ranked 2nd for non-violent crime, which would include property crimes, but we expect a 20% decrease for 2024. So the trending over the since the year 2020 has been on a downward trend, which is what we are dealing with currently. And the report talks about 2019 to 2022.
Chief Medizadeh adds that nationwide crime statistics are available from Stats Canada and are updated annually in the summer. Well, we've got a big weekend ahead of us. It's Valentine's Day and also the Family Day long weekend, at least here in Alberta. And with that, folks could be hitting the road to do some traveling this long weekend. Troy Hicks, Chief Fire Marshal with the Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services, offers some tips for keeping your home safe while you're away and also when hitting the highway on a winter road trip.
I always have my winter jacket with me. I always have a couple sets of toques and gloves, winter boots, anything like that, that heaven forbid something happens. So just make sure you do have a warm kit like that, blankets for you and your family. Another thing too, always make sure your vehicle's full. Cell phones, make sure you have one and make sure it's charged and ready to go. If you're unlucky enough that maybe you do go off the road and you can't get out, call AMA, you call anyone you can to get some help and get some service. Get out of your vehicle and have a look. Don't just stay in your vehicle with the engine running, trying to stay warm. If you're now in a snowbank, your exhaust and your muffler could be covered in snow. Now you don't have ventilation, now your vehicle is filling up with that exhaust. If you're leaving your home for any time, I know most insurance companies want to know that you have someone checking on your home. I always turn my heat down a little bit. Unplug anything you don't need.
Hicks also recommends unplugging televisions, coffee pots, toasters, and other appliances that you're not going to be using. It's Valentine's Day and love is in the air, but so are romance scams. Wes LaFortune, Media Relations with the Better Business Bureau, explains how to avoid these pretend Romeo and Juliets who aren't exactly looking for romantic relationships, but are instead after your money with fake profiles on different social networks.
Too good looking, the hot factor, too hot, too much money, too successful. It's like, wow, this is the man or woman of my dream right away. Probably not. So that's a big one. Biggest red flag is the money, asking for money, no matter what the circumstances. Hard luck story or an investment scheme, the romance cryptocurrency scam, or they call that catfishing, somebody that creates a false profile. The whole intention of that person is to build a trusting relationship with you and then gain your trust. In Alberta, cryptocurrency investments in 2023 officially cost Albertans more than $300 million. But we know that is much higher because only about 5% of people actually report.
LaFortune encourages anyone who has been a victim of this type of crime to report it to local police or the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. Well, after Valentine's Day and just before Family Day, there is another great day to celebrate here in Canada. On February 15th, 1965, Canada took a significant step in its history with the adoption of the national flag that today flies proudly in every corner of the country. Our BCN Heidi Echeverria spoke with the co-chair at General Stewart Branch 4 at the Royal Canadian Legion, Glenn Miller, who explains more about the history of our flag.
This day, the 15th day of February 1965, will always be remembered as a milestone in Canada's national progress.
For long periods of time, Canada has had a maple leaf represent our nation on sports uniforms back in the 1900s. In World War I, the maple leaf was a proud symbol, and even in the Boer War. So all these things contribute to the final iteration that we see today.
This February the 15th marks 60 years since the Canadian flag with the red and white maple leaf was first raised in 1965. On February the 15th, 1996, 31 years later, John Chrétien, then Prime Minister of Canada, declared that from that day forward, Canada's National Flag Day would be celebrated. Glenn Miller, co-chair with the General Stewart Branch 4, discusses details about that proclamation.
The proclamation, which is behind me, was signed by Her Majesty, and then the 15th was chosen to make that officially the flag of the country. It was first raised on Parliament. Here in Lethbridge and across communities across Canada, it was also done on that day as well. On Flag Day tomorrow, Saturday, we're actually going to be hosting a short ceremony at the Legion where we take down the old flag and put up a new one just to show our patriotism. That flag has gone on to represent the values of our nation and warmly embraced by new citizens when they're sworn in as well. And so that's a sense of belonging that they can readily connect with.
God bless Canada.
Since its adoption, the flag has been a reflection of Canadian pride and identity. Today, as we celebrate its anniversary, we honor its legacy and an emblem of united and belonging. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echevarria.
Thank you, Heidi. Well, it may be the coldest month of the year right now, but that doesn't mean people aren't already planning for the warmer months ahead. The city of Lethbridge is posting full-time seasonal job positions to work through the spring and summer months. Approximately 50 to 60 positions will open in departments including parks and cemeteries, transportation, waste, and recycling.
So some of the qualifications that are standard across our job postings are we want to ensure that our employees have a GED or high school education. We're also looking for employees that have, or candidates that have a driver's license, but we want to be clear and ensure that they're not GDL licenses. So we will be hosting a job fair on March 11th in person at the Cavendish Centre on the west side. We'll also be doing a virtual job fair on the 12th for all of those students who may be working out or going to school outside of the community and still wanting to come back to Lethbridge for the summer. We don't want to prevent them from having that opportunity as well to participate in working for the city for the summer.
Some available job postings are live on the City of Lethbridge website under the Careers tab. All remaining positions will be available to apply at the March 11th job fair. The city is also asking for feedback on snow routes and the Windrow Assistance Program. The Windrow Assistance Program was piloted this past winter as a way for people who live on snow routes and have mobility issues to receive assistance in clearing snow windrows from their property left behind by the city's plows. Around 500 people have signed up for the program.
We are scheduled to report back to council later this spring. That's why we are really looking for feedback from residents, what their thoughts are. Last year's feedback really helped us to go back to the drawing board. We think we understood that people with mobility challenges were really challenged by the windrows, and that helped us create this Windrow Assistance Program where we have over 500 people subscribed to. We've only been able to activate the Windrow Assistance and the snow routes once in the season. There is snow coming this weekend. There is going to be more snow coming end of February, beginning of March. So hopefully there will be some events and where people can gauge what they think and then provide feedback.
The survey will be live on the city's website until midnight on March the 23rd. Well, it is Valentine's Day, and do you get your pets Valentines? Just curious, because check this out. The Brookfield Zoo officials in Chicago treated a tiger, a bear, a leopard, and some sea lions to some heart-shaped gifts for Valentine's Day. Oh, look at that. He got right in there. The zoo says that this is enriching, and it helps provide some stimulation for their animals' mental and physical health. Oh gosh, I love how he just pops out of the water like that. How cute is that? This just warms my heart. It is so sweet. Let's check back in with that tiger there and see how he's doing. He looks so proud of himself that he got that open there. I just love this. And those animals weren't the only ones swooning on Valentine's Day. Turns out Philadelphia Eagles fans took to the streets today to swoon over their championship team for the Super Bowl parade. Some of them braving the cold throughout last night to ensure that they got a good viewing spot. Apparently, fans were even perched up in trees and atop ladders to get a glimpse of their Super Bowl champs.
So I've been here since 11 o'clock last night, which would be Thursday. Now it's Friday. The reason we're here is because no one likes us. No one likes us. No one likes us.
These Eagle fans is wild. They bleed green for our city. You know what I mean? We've been waiting for this thing for a long time. And I've been out here since like 3 o'clock in the morning. I've been waiting all week to come out here and shoot these pictures. And I'm just excited.
You gotta love that team spirit. Looks like so much fun to be there. And while those Eagles fans weren't the only ones braving the cold, over here in southern Alberta, we've got a lot of snow to contend with as well. We received 2 to 4 centimeters of snow today, and another 2 centimeters is expected tonight, along with minus 34 wind chill and a risk of frostbite. Sounds like a good Valentine's evening to stay in and get cozy. I'll be right back with the full weather picture. Well, like I said before, it might be a good Valentine's evening to stay in and hibernate. Why? Well, because here in Lethbridge, we're going to be seeing minus 32 with that wind chill. Overnight low minus 26, but with that wind chill, it's going to feel more like minus 32 and risk of frostbite. So not very nice at all. Even tomorrow, Saturday, we're still expecting those flurries, 2 more centimeters of snow tonight. Minus 18 for the daytime high on Saturday. Minus 15 on Sunday with lots of clouds, mainly overcast that day. Minus 16 on Monday. Minus 17 on Tuesday. It just seems like it's hardly going to let up until we get into midweek next week. Minus 2 for the high on Wednesday there with lots of sunshine. Then finally we get into the pluses. Yay. We're going to see a high of plus 5 next Thursday with a mix of sun and clouds. So the average high for this time of year, plus 2, average low minus 10. 13 was our record high on this day, happening back in 1931, and in 1923, and again in 1936, we saw that record low of minus 38. 7:43 is when the sun rose this morning. Sun set this evening at 5:49 p.m. So we're getting more daylight these days. That's the plus right there. So 4 minutes longer today than we had yesterday. On the west coast, a bit of some showers there in Victoria. 7 for the high. Periods of light rain in Vancouver, and then in the higher terrain, that could actually turn to snow. 5 degrees for the high, minus 18 in Edmonton tomorrow with periods of flurries, 30% chance of flurries tomorrow in Calgary with a high of minus 17. So we're still seeing some extreme cold temperatures in place there, particularly in Saskatoon with that, with the minus 30s. Wind chill, risk of frostbite in minutes, minus 22 for the daytime high. Clear skies though, minus 22. Also in Regina, could see some snow there, and minus 20 in Winnipeg. Okay, so I was complaining about the snow being in southern Alberta, but out here in the central part of the country, they're getting a lot. So there is a winter storm warning in effect, particularly for Sunday. So Toronto on Sunday could see 15 to 25 centimeters of snow. Tomorrow, 5 more centimeters, minus 1 for the high. Tomorrow, Ottawa seeing 2 centimeters, but 20 to 30 beginning on Sunday. And then same thing in Montreal. They could expect 20 to 30 centimeters of snow by Sunday. But tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud and high of minus 9. As we look into the Maritimes here in Atlantic Canada, Fredericton sitting at minus 7 tomorrow with clear skies in Halifax, minus 4. Sunshine expected in Charlottetown tomorrow with a high of minus 8 and minus 6 in St. John's with snow, blowing snow, and we're talking gusts up to 60, 80, 100 kilometers per hour along certain parts of the coast there. It's going to be very wet, snowy, and windy. There you have it. That is your forecast. WestJet says new multi-billion-dollar long-term commercial agreement is in the works with German aircraft services firm Lufthansa Technik. The deal would see Lufthansa Technik build a new aircraft engine maintenance facility in Calgary to service WestJet's approximately 50 Boeing 737 MAX airplanes. The facility is slated to be built by the Calgary Airport Authority and is expected to cost about $120 million. WestJet says the 15-year contract is the largest in the carrier's existence. A new poll suggests 14% of Albertans would cut off American streaming services in response to U.S. tariff threats and talk of taking over Canada, the lowest percentage recorded in any province. Leger polled about 1,600 Canadians online between February 7th and February 10th. More than 4/5 of those who responded said they have significantly increased how many Canadian-made products they buy or will do so soon. Canadian Tire CEO Greg Hicks says he has noticed a succession of interest rate cuts that have had a positive effect on consumers, which helped them to ease up on the frugality they adopted to cope with the economic slowdown. But that progress has likely been, quote, substantially erased by tariff threats.
Greg Hicks says recent interest rate cuts had shoppers willing to spend a bit more, but renewed worries about tariffs and the impact they could have on the economy have consumers showing signs of pulling back. He says Canadian Tire gets about 15% of its goods from the U.S., and it's looking for alternate suppliers in Canada. Roughly a quarter of the products it buys from south of the border can likely be replaced with Canadian-supplied items, but it's a much tougher task for certain categories, like the key auto parts segment, so it might have to look overseas.
Well, Canadian Tire is preparing the best it can for potential 25% tariffs, which has been said to drop in March. They are also keeping an eye on other factors, and one being the Canadian dollar exchange rate. And with that in mind, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 215 points to 25,483. The Dow was down 165 basis points to 44,546. The S&P 500 was down 0.4 of a point to 6,114, and the Nasdaq was up 81 points to 20,026. West Texas Intermediate oil was down 55 cents to $70.74 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 9 cents to $3.72 US. Gold was down 42.30 to $28.83 US an ounce, and silver was up 15 cents to $32.80 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.57 per bushel, barley is at $6.58, canola is at $15.05, and corn is at $8.53 per bushel. Live cattle were down 180 to 197.75. Feeder cattle March contract were down 162 to 266.35, and lean hogs was up 10 cents to 89.47. And the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 70.50 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, the federal government's goods and services tax break on a slew of items ends tomorrow. Shoppers have been getting some relief on restaurant meals, children's clothing and toys, some alcohol and more for the past 2 months now. Canadian business owners say the GST holiday was a gift, but not one that inspired the flurry of sales some had anticipated. It's Valentine's Day, a perfect time to celebrate the one you love. So I took the chance to chat with Tim Syme, the seniors pastor over at Evangelical Free Church in Lethbridge. He gave valuable advice on ways to keep the romance alive in marriage. That is coming up after the break. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure and send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or our YouTube page for more of our stories and interviews. Well, it's always exciting to attend a wedding for a couple who are so in love. And of course, that flame typically does fade over time sometimes. And marriage can be a challenge at times as well. So joining us today to discuss marriage and how to keep the romance going is Tim Syme. He is the seniors pastor at the Evangelical Free Church in Lethbridge. Tim, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Okay, so how long have you been married, and has it all been a bed of roses for you?
Well, we're at 57 years.
Wow.
My wife and I, and there's no such thing as a bed of roses. We've been very blessed by God, but I think one of the things I've learned in life, that you're blessed because you make right decisions and right choices. It isn't that God just overrides everything. When we make right choices, the blessing of God comes, and we'd have to say that's been true of our life.
Well, romance sometimes fades in marriage, and we may not even notice the signs as they're happening. So why is that?
Well, I think it's called life.
Yeah.
Distractions start coming. You start your careers, you have children, and your life is chaotic for years raising those children, and you go through different seasons of life, and you suddenly realize that there's a lot going on, and keeping in connection with each other to build that love relationship can drift if you're not intentional about it.
Yeah. So once you do notice the signs, how should a couple respond to that? What are some of the keys to keeping the romance going?
Well, I think you have to realize again what season of life you're in, because when you're just newly married, the romance isn't that hard because you're just coming out of a dating and engagement time, and you just slip into your marriage and you keep developing that. But other responsibilities do come, and you just get busy. And when you get busy, something sacrifices in that. So I think you've got to make the decisions to how you're going to directly keep that going. And somebody told me years ago, well, it's very simple. You just throw another log on the fire, and the fire will keep burning. It doesn't have to go out. And I think that's a kind of a practical way of looking at what log do you need to throw on there right now? Do you need to get away? Do you need to read? Do you need to learn something? Do you need to change your schedule in some way?
Okay, I was going to ask you, practically speaking, what would that look like? But those are some good examples there. And would it maybe be a good suggestion to do something that you used to enjoy doing together while you were dating to maybe rekindle that flame?
Yes, if that's something that's still practical for you. When we were dating, we loved to go to Nat Park and ride the roller coaster all day. Well, when we were 40, that wasn't quite the rush in that same way. So you look at where you are and what kinds of things would you enjoy at that point in life, and make sure you just plan them in, because if you don't plan it, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And, some marriage experts say that one of the most important things for a woman in marriage is for the man to make sure that he spends quality time with her and communicating with his wife. Is this true in your experience? And what are some ways that a man can do this?
Oh, communication is, absolutely essential. If you don't have communication, you can't resolve anything. You can't solve anything. You can't move ahead in anything. So learning the skills of communication is essential. The marriage gurus talk about communication being words that are used, tone that's used, and nonverbal that's used, and they all have different percentages. But the thing that I think is interesting is they all say the same thing, that if your nonverbal is one thing and your words are a different thing, the nonverbal wins. And so you have to start learning how that communication, and every relationship's different in the sense of learning what works for me, what works for my wife, and then intentionally doing those things.
Yeah, no, definitely. What about doing something like a double date with another couple?
Well, that's always a lot of fun. We used to do so much of that when we were dating. I think it's still valid at any stage of life when you have friends that you can go out that you enjoy being with, because what it does, it just expands everything. You got 4 people interacting, inputting into subjects and ideas and thoughts. We just finished a Zoom call with our friends we used to double date with in high school. And it's just like we were all back in high school. We all look older, but just doing that Zoom call, we laughed about things that we experienced and talked about things we're facing right now. And that interaction with different people is extremely valuable.
Yeah, it really is. It can be really fun to do that as well. So, I mean, we've also heard that, one of the most important things for men is to be respected. So what does that look like, practically speaking?
Yeah, that's that's something right out of Scripture, out of Ephesians, where it says, respect. And men are very vulnerable people. And when there's a sense of not being respected, that's a wound. And wounds can be the most dangerous thing because they can separate us in the relationship in the way that comes along, and we suddenly find that we're dealing with something where there's hurts and they're not being addressed in that way. One of the things I just saw recently, which was a good reminder to me, it's always when you're out in a public setting, you can say something about your spouse and you can get a laugh because it's a bit sarcastic and it's funny. It might even be partly true, but the laugh isn't worth it.
No.
Because you wound somebody, and that is something that never allow anything that you have to deal with to be done in a public setting to make a point, because that's going to be hurtful.
Exactly. So how can a wife show respect to her husband, and also vice versa?
Well, I think it always comes down to back to the communication. Scripture talks about communicating in James chapter 1, and I've always used that pattern where it talks about being in our own relationship of coming to the place where we're quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. But in most human relationships, we totally reverse that. We get offended, so we get angry or tense, and so then we speak too much, and we're terrible at listening at that point. But listening and hearing what somebody is actually saying and what the key issue is, it often isn't what sparked a discussion or an argument. It's a building up thing, and to get to the right point so that you can actually come up with a right solution.
That sounds hard, though, too, like practically speaking.
It's work.
Yeah.
It's work.
And it seems like a daily thing as well.
Sure.
Yeah. I think there's a tendency in marriage to take the other for granted, too, sometimes. So how can we remember to notice and honor our spouse?
Yeah, that takes pretty specific attention to keep at it, because everything else will be there to kind of draw away from that. But we have to remember that there's actions, and actions really are what produce the feeling of love. That's what Corinthians talks about. Be patient, be kind. That isn't a passage to marriage, but if you took those 9 traits that it talks about there and transferred them to your marriage relationship and took the action, your spouse would feel loved.
Oh, wow. And then, of course, disagreements come up in marriage. It's inevitable. So, and it, sometimes can end up in an argument. So how can we deal with disagreements in a way that doesn't end up with angry words?
Yeah, and you have to develop your awareness of each other, of how to communicate to your specific spouse, because that's different. Some people can argue and it's just no point. Other people can argue and it's destructive because the spouse, just one of them can't handle that. If it's going back in the past or time or way they were treated in different ways, but it's coming to that place where you have to really make sure you find the time to deal with something and define again, what is that issue, and give it a very specific focus, or else you just start throwing in stuff that can't be solved because it's from months or years ago, and then you've lost track.
Yeah, good point. So how important is it for couples just to do some kind of activity together, perhaps a walk, playing sports, whatever, dancing lessons?
Yeah, it's always a great thing to find out what season you're in and what do we enjoy right now. And if that's a travel, or if that's just a relaxation day, or if that's just doing a particular thing, going out and being with people. We have our kids and our grandkids, and our greatest joy is just to find occasions when we can be with them and see and hear what's happening in their lives. It charges up both of us in the sense of, keeping a focus on our own relationship as we watch them developing their relationships at different seasons of life.
Yeah, definitely. You're quoting a lot of scripture there, and I'm just curious, what about spiritually speaking? Should couples, is it helpful for couples to spend time doing devotions together or praying together? Like, how can that work in today's busy world?
Yeah, busy is the word. And I think if you just look at the reality, the Bible isn't a marriage manual, but when it speaks about human relationships on any level, if you take those directions to human relationships and took that into the most important human relationship, which is your spouse, you would see dramatic input into your lives right away. There's an old illustration that's been used often. I've used it in premarital counseling of the triangle where the spouse and the husband are just at the bottom, and then God is at the top of the triangle. But as you move up the triangle towards God, guess what? You're moving closer to each other. And that spiritual foundation, and I think my wife and I would both say, because of the backgrounds we came from, the only reason we're still having a great time at 57 years, which you don't plan when you're 21, but suddenly it's there, is because we continually, individually move towards God, and that moves us towards each other. And it's still true after all these years.
Yeah, it's kind of like that threefold cord is not easily broken, right? No, that's so interesting. Any final thoughts or final advice for couples who are having some marriage struggles?
Well, I've always approached it from don't just stand there, do something. If any of us woke up in the morning and we had a lump in a place where it shouldn't be, we would take action. We would call a doctor, we'd go get help. But when it comes to relationships, people just seem to think, oh, it's going to go away or it's going to get better. But the resources are unbelievable in this day and age. There's no shortage of resources, and you just have to take action. You have to learn, where can I go to get the resources? And once you start doing that, you're going to get the benefit of it. So do something.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time and for your great advice today, Tim. Appreciate having you on.
Oh, my pleasure. Good to be with you.
Tim Syme is the seniors pastor at the Evangelical Free Church in Lethbridge.
We all want to see our communities see crime decrease, right? But there's usually not enough government budget to go around to hire enough police officers to get that job done. But there are some volunteer groups who are making a difference, and one of those is Citizens on Patrol. So joining us today from Southern Alberta's Piikani Nation to tell us more is Kimberly Hurst. She's the president of the Alberta Citizens on Patrol Association, and RCMP Staff Sergeant Vince Bacon. So good to have you with us.
Good morning.
Thanks for the promotion, Sergeant.
Yeah. Okay. I thought it was Staff Sergeant. All right. Well, hey, can you explain, first of all, an overview, I guess, of what is Citizens on Patrol, or COP?
Yeah, good. So Citizens on Patrol is a volunteer, and we are the extra eyes and ears of our local law enforcement agency. And on Piikani Nation, we fall underneath the RCMP. So we have a really good working relationship with the local detachment and Sergeant Bacon. Honestly, without that relationship and that partnership, we would not be able to do what we do in communities. So we're very grateful for that.
Okay, so you've got volunteers that are kind of keeping an eye on things. So you're on patrol at various times, and if you see something suspicious, you call the RCMP, basically.
We have a Signal app that we communicate on, as well as with Alberta Citizens on Patrol, we have an app that tracks us via GPS.
Okay.
But we utilize both of those, and if we see anything, we'll let the members on duty know what's going on. We never get out of our vehicles and engage in any activity. Leave that the RCMP. Our safety and security is of the utmost. So.
Now, Kimberly, you live in that area, right, in the Pincher Creek Crow's Nest area. So I think probably exciting news that you know, again, this is a very first time that we've seen a First Nations group establish a Citizens on Patrol chapter. So what's the response been from the community?
It's been good. It's been good. We're always looking for more volunteers, but it's great to have the support of the community and from Chief and Council. Without the support of everybody, the saying goes, it takes a village, and it really does. It takes the whole nation here to ensure that this program is going to be successful and that it acts what's happening, and that we have to work together to make it be a success.
Well, how many volunteers do you have right now?
We had 7, and as of yesterday, we now have 8.
Okay, so numbers are going up. That's a good thing. How many, I guess, would you ideally need to patrol effectively?
I mean, 15 to 20 would be just magnificent, but as long as you have volunteers that are engaged, we can make it work as well.
Okay. Now, I understand that there was a grant given for this project. I'm assuming that's probably from the government of Alberta, or is it from the RCMP? I'm not sure where that's coming from. But you need some more funds, right? And so let me ask you, I guess, what does that money go towards?
So the first grant that we received, we got some jackets that have our logo on it and Alberta on Patrol logo, as well as some shirts, just to make sure that when we are out in community, people know who we are and what it is. And it helps to start discussion. What we're hoping for is additional funding for things like reflective vests, flashlights, and fuel to help us. As well as data to help cover the cost of a cell phone, so that sure that everybody who's patrolling has access to that while they're out on patrol.
Okay, gotcha. And so more funds needing to be raised. So I'm assuming there'll be some community or business fundraising, that sort of thing, or can you lobby the government for more funds, that sort of thing, or?
It'll be a mix of both. I mean, Sergeant Bacon and the detachment has been wonderful. They helped us with getting some new brochures. We have a wonderful banner on the side of the detachment with our logos on it together, which is a milestone in itself to have the RCMP logo with that. But ideally right now, we are looking for donations from community, local businesses, anybody that's able to support us. We are looking for additional grants and funding. But to get us going, just some local donations would be wonderful.
No, for sure. Yeah. Sergeant Bacon, did you stay in communication? Like when you know the COP volunteers are out there, do you sometimes give them a shout and say, hey, have you seen anything, that sort of thing? Particularly, I mean, if you're looking for something that's something's going down and you're trying to prevent something from happening, that sort of thing, do you sometimes use them as well? Again, they're extra eyes and ears. They're in places where you can't be everywhere. Do you sometimes kind of communicate with them and tell us what's going on your end of town?
Absolutely. So absolutely, it's a partnership, right? We work all together. They supplement us by an extra pair of eyes. We work together. So let's say something suspicious happened, we have ways to communicate together. They will let us know what's going on. They are not going to deal with it, but they will let us know what's going on, as a witness, and it out there to address the situation.
Okay, and you mentioned again, sounds like volunteers are using their own vehicles. Now, are these marked vehicles or are they unmarked? And I guess would it be, is it better or worse to have them marked? Which one's more helpful?
Well, that's one of the projects we're looking at. So we know that the town on the east side, Fort McLeod, have their own vehicle, marked vehicle. What we're looking at, it probably from money from the nation, would like to have magnets, so people see or volunteers patrolling in the area to reassure them.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose it does actually maybe add a bit of a sense of security, right? When you see that there's somebody out there looking out for you, right? So, and maybe even it's a bit of a deterrent too, who knows? But how often do members go on patrol, and how long are the shifts? And do you ever go out at night? I mean, of course, a lot of crime does take place at night, but that also makes it more dangerous potentially, I suppose, for volunteers. How do you handle that?
So at this point, obviously we're starting, so that the team were able to get on the road. By example, Halloween evening, we had a team on the road that were patrolling the area, making sure that everything's fine with the kids and that the community were safe. It's up to them, right? So a volunteer can show up, reach out to the detachment. Hey, I'm going to be on the road for the next 2 hours. Just so you know, if something happened, I'll reach out to you. So they can create an initial contact with the officers on shift. And, if they're available for 2 hours, it's 2 hours. If you can stick for 8 hours, 8 hours is even better. So, we're really flexible, and we do understand our volunteers are, volunteers, and we don't want them to feel like they have to stick to a schedule.
Okay, very interesting. Now, I understand that one of the areas members help with sometimes is called the Speed Watch program. Can you explain what that is and how it works?
So we have Speed Watch in some of our larger communities, and there's a mobile sign that's on a trailer that they will be able to move to different locations with partnership from their RCMP, letting them know, we want you to watch a playground zone, or we want you to watch coming into a community. And they will move that trailer that has radar enforced on a sign, and it will just read out digitally the speed that they're going. Not all of our communities have them. It's mostly our larger centers, but it is a really good initiative to have, to keep some stats on things as well and to raise awareness.
Okay, yeah, and sure, whenever you see one of those, radar signs going up or down, it gets your attention and you slow down, right? So, hey, why not? So volunteers also spend time looking for things like illegally tinted windows, I was reading, and, or maybe even rolling stops at a stop sign, that sort of thing. So how do you go about handling that as a volunteer? Do they take pictures or videos of license plates, that sort of thing, and then send them along to the RCMP? How does that work?
The volunteers are witnesses. That's what it is. So just like anyone will be operating a motor vehicle on the highway and notice something suspicious, can reach out to police for assistance. It's the same thing. Like if they notice that a pattern, they can just take notes and provide a statement and provide the information to our detachment, and we will then address it accordingly.
Okay. It reminds me, one time I got a phone call from a police officer saying, somebody reported that, you were not driving safely at a Costco gas station. I'm going like, well, I was there, but, I didn't remember driving unsafely, but maybe I did. And it was a reminder to me and going, okay, yeah, I got to make sure I look at both ways when I'm exiting, that sort of thing. So, you guys do follow up on it. So good to know. Can you share any stories of how, go ahead.
I was going to say it's all about the approach, and it's all about the way we bring it up, and it's all I think that education is a big part of it, and I think people appreciate that phone call. A kind and polite phone call.
Right.
Hey, this is what.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Nobody was shaking their fist at me or anything. So, can you share any stories of maybe how a tip from a COP member actually resulted in crime prevention or arrests being made? I know it's new for you guys here in the Piikani Nation, but do you have any stories from other citizens on patrol places where this actually works?
I've been on patrol. This was a few years ago. I was on patrol in another community and noticed some suspicious activity, and I just felt that something was definitely off and we needed to report. And it ended up resulting in a couple of DUIs. And then had another suspicious, that gut feeling that you get. And we had trying to steal fuel from a bulk gas station and put it into a drum in the box of their truck. We've had a lot that goes, and I guess we need to sort of toot our own horn a little bit more to let people know the work that we are doing on our own time, but it does make a big difference. I mean, and even if you're out and you don't see anything, that is also a success. We have made sure that we are a positive set of headlights that are out in community, and we're deterring. The simple steps of that can deter it.
Yeah, and I guess it's like anything else, right? I mean, there's going to be shifts where there's nothing happening and you're going, it's kind of exciting when something does happen in one sense, although ideally we like nothing to happen. We wouldn't even need COP, right, if everybody, did what was right. But it's not the world we live in. So, you know what? Hey, I want to throw that out there, I guess, as well for people who, enjoy those kinds of things where you get a bit of excitement, right? Well, you know what, and you're helping keep law and order, that's pretty cool. Now, what kinds of training do COP members undergo? I mean, you don't just send them out to the wolves sort of thing. There must be some sort of training, right?
Oh, you go ahead.
So in order to become a member, you need to get a current criminal record check. And once you've done that, we also have an application process where they have to fill out a form. We have communication with our local law enforcement agency that even after they filled out the record check, we do review that application to still ensure that this person is an appropriate fit. And then we have training that has been created by a retired RCMP member. And he had 36 years on the job in various positions. So he's really well aware of what we need to be looking for and what skills we need to be working on. So we do work with that as well. And he travels the province to different groups with us. And then we also work on just updating skills area dependent on what our local law enforcement sees that we need in that area. And we'll bring in somebody to help us with that.
Okay. Right. And are our volunteers usually seniors? They have more time, right? Or do you get some young people involved?
No. You know what? For example, our group here in Begunny, we have from, say, 23 to 73 for age range.
Okay, nice. I like it. Very good. And now, if I know we've got several COP groups in Southern Alberta: Coaldale, Tabor, I think Fort Macleod, Redcliffe, Pincher Creek, but you could probably use a few more, right? Other communities. And so, if somebody wants to start up their own COP in their community, how do they do that?
Email president@acopa.ca, and I will get back to them.
Okay, but anybody can do it, right? I mean, if you get the right person, we can get as many as we need out there, right? So, okay. Hey, well,
a change in their community and just wants to have a positive influence, a positive take on their community. And anybody can do it, and regardless of age. And for full patrols, as long as you're 18 and over and you pass that criminal record check, love to have you join us in any of our communities.
Okay, sounds good. I appreciate what you guys are doing for the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks to Kimberly and Sergeant Bacon here. Again, the president of the Alberta Citizens on Patrol Association. And Sergeant Bacon is the commander of the Piikani Nation RCMP detachment. I'm Paul Arthur, and on behalf of all of us at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.